So good morning and welcome to the Sunday service for the Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast. And I had just said before, I'm so glad so many of you are crying because that song really, I love it, but especially the place where he says, and Papa, I don't think I said I love you near enough. So welcome. This will be a good time to turn off phones. And if there's anybody that's going to be watching this week that's never been to a Center for Spiritual Living before, we believe there's one God, many paths to that God, and we're here to love, honor, and support you, no matter what your divine path is. And this Center for Spiritual Living, Space Coast, is a safe haven for people of all beliefs and lifestyles, whoever you are and wherever you may find yourself on your journey of faith. You're welcome here. And our practitioner today is Reverend Jenna Watkins, and our reader is Barb Loftus. And so we're going to do our first announcement. Barbara Fillmore from Unity is going to come up and talk about their book sale.
Thank you. Now that I'm all teared up. Great. I know. Happy Father's Day. A lot of mothers had to play father too, so this kind of counts everybody on Father's Day. I was blessed with a wonderful father, and one of the things he gave to me was a love of books, and it's the books I'm here to talk about today. This is the last day of our book sale. After today, when the last person walks out, I'm packing up all the rest of it. So a lot of good items left, 5 for $1. A lot of I know not everyone has a CD player anymore, but there are some lovely CDs up there. So do stop by. I will be up there to greet you. It was lovely to meet so many of you last week, and thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. So just a couple of announcements. Our book group is still meeting Tuesdays at 2 o'clock, and we're studying the 4 agreements, and anybody is welcome. In the past, we've had people come. It's a book discussion group. So last week we were doing the first agreement, and this week we're doing the first agreement. So, just feel free. We're doing it on Zoom, and Becky sends out the link. Also, we have a Socrates Circle that we had decided, initially we tried it on Zoom, but we decided we're going to do it live on the first and third Saturday of the month at 10 o'clock in the morning here. And one of the things, we kind of got the first week that we did the book group in the writing that Don Miguel Ruiz did. Before he gets to the agreements, he talks about dreams. And so we got into a discussion, and I said to the group, gee, I know somebody that does wonderful dream interpretation workshops. Would you like me to ask her if she would do it? And they said yes. So on Tuesday, June 28th, rather than doing the book group in the same time slot as the book group from 2, and this one will be to 3:30, Mickey Rosalind she calls it a dream decoding workshop. And she said, learn a simple method to decide the symbols found in your dreams. Dream messages provide insight, solve a problem, spark a new creative idea, or help you heal. The dream is speaking to the dreamer. And somebody, when I told them about this, said, I never remember my dreams. And I remember in the workshop, Mickey will give you some ideas on how you can remember your dreams the next day. Last announcement, today is Unexpected Income Sunday. So please, if I forget, don't let me forget, okay? Somebody yell, okay? With that, we'll do another video.
So let's just take this moment to settle in. go into just a few moments of silence. And let us turn our attentions into that heart space. That space that is filled with love and awareness that we are more than human, that we are greater than this body, that we are one in spirit, that creative force, who often we call Father God, has moved itself through each and every one of us to fill us with wholeness and with love. And as we tap into that awareness, let us just expand it out. Expand it to each and every person in this room, wherever we may be, allowing that love to touch lives around the world. For we know that as the infinite expressions of Mother, Father, God, it is us who will heal the world. And so as we turn within and feel the love and expand it out, we heal ourselves and we heal each and every one we touch. Bring in a lightness, a love, a wholeness, appreciation, a vibration that lifts and transforms us above anything that is harmful and into the light, into the love, into the wholeness. And as we come together today, I, of course, bless the people who make this service happen behind the scenes, and of course, Reverend Dr. Ron Fox. For I know that his heart is big and overflowing. He is a man of sensitivity and love, and he allows that heart to open and expand and to share with us all that he hears and experiences from the One Most High, flowing through him as words and ideas and thoughts. Allow us to value and appreciate who we are and expand our lives. And for all of this, I do say thank you, and so it is.
Good morning, everyone. I get my glasses on my head here. Sorry about that. It is a wise father that knows his own child. This is a quote from William Shakespeare. God is often referred to as the Father, and in this context, we are his children. For the purpose of today, please put aside any feelings you may have about attributing gender to God. Rather, think of this quote as meaning it is the wise creator that knows its own creation. And surely we can agree that the creator is wise. But what about the idea that it is a wise child who knows their own father? Do we know our creator? Do we realize we have our creator's genes, DNA? Are we identical to our creator? No. But we have the essence of our creator within us. And by knowing this, by strengthening that awareness and developing our connection and shared essence with God, we cultivate the calm, unity, and strength that God gave us access to from the start. We will have available all the resources we need in our journey through life, and we will know we are not alone. This sounds like a relationship worth having to me. Happy Father's Day.
So, good morning again. I guess I didn't say Happy Father's Day to all the fathers. And I have a present. This is one of the presents that I got today from my wife. So today's a little bit different day. Rather than me doing all the speaking, we're going to have some people from our congregation come up and speak about their dads. And I just wanted to, I saw something, I'm fumbling here through my papers about the history of Father's Day. And seeing as how I can't find it, I'll just tell you from memory that Father's Day started due to a father from the Civil War who was widowed by two women. And between he and his wives, he had 14 children. And one of his daughters loved him so much that she went out and she lobbied for years. She got the idea on a Mother's Day. She said, gee, if we're having a Mother's Day, why don't we have a day for fathers? And she eventually was the one who did so much lobbying and so much nudging of representatives that eventually it became standard, and it became a holiday in 1972. President Nixon was the one. I didn't know that. I found it out this week. President Nixon was the one who is attributed with moving forward and making Father's Day a national holiday. So Barb, in her reading, touched on something else that I wanted to talk about. And it's an article from Science of Mind magazine by Rocco Errico, who is an expert on the Bible and an expert he's on Aramaic. And he wrote in Science of Mind, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he said in the Western world, we think very quickly categorize the male gender. But he said that's not what they were emphasizing. It's not what Jesus was emphasizing. The word father in the Near East is used in a different way, and it's still used that way. He said it's a term of endearment. It's used exactly like we use the terms honey, precious, sweetheart, darling. They're not gender specific. And so he said the meaning of father is simply beloved. I thought that was really, really different and interesting. And he said, so when people do a prayer and they speak to Mother, Father, God, they're speaking in terms of, a lot of it in terms of gender. And so he said, again, the meaning is beloved. So in the Lord's Prayer, we may address God in the first line as our beloved who art in heaven, our beloved who is everywhere, our beloved who is in heaven. The little lad just back from play, the lad I used to be. And then she wrote, God wisely provided a father and a mother to propagate life. And although we have been given an individual father on earth, we all originate from the infinite God. We can all rest secure in the knowledge that God cares, protects, guides, and leads us in the right direction and only wants the best for us. Possibly, your father did not always live up to the qualities fathers inspire: strength, devotion, confidence, teaching, stability, safety, and security. As his son, you may have felt your sister was really the apple of his eye. Or as his daughter, you may have sensed that he was more attuned to your brother's athletic skills and did not know how to relate to the feminine. Maybe his way of showing love was to be a workaholic and provide material things for your comfort. Whether he has made his transition or is alive, imagine him as the little boy he was, looking up to his father. Did his dreams come true? And I read that. I want to read it in conjunction with one other thing. There's a thick book. I read this book in one day. It's father's stories about children. And one of the things when she talks in here about that his dream come true, when I got about halfway through, I said to Becky, there's something that's really coming through to me here that I personally didn't experience with my dad. And it was how many of the dads never said, I love you to their sons or daughters, but their kids knew they were loved by actions. And so it struck me that some people miss that. But if you do, just know that it's a time too of forgiveness and just knowing that our dads fathered us the way they were fathered to a large extent. So I have just talked way more than I intended to. So what we're going to do is have people come up and share. And I want to share about my dad later, but I told Becky, I asked her if she would share on her dad, and she's busy back there. So she said, you do it. So Becky and I had really different experiences with our dads. Becky's parents got divorced when she was like 5 or 6, and she only saw her dad 3 more times. But I was there one of the times, and I want to share it with you. So her niece was getting married, and before the wedding, they had a cocktail party, which we thought was really cool. And so Becky and I are standing there. We each have a drink in our hand, and I had never seen her father. And this man walks in the door, and as soon as he walked in the door, I mean, they couldn't have looked more alike. And I said to Becky, your father just walked in the door. And she hadn't seen him since she graduated high school. And she gave me her drink, and she ran over to him, threw her arms around him, and gave him a big kiss and said, hi, Dad, I'm Becky. And I told her I wanted to talk to him, that I wanted to ask him how he could do what he did. And I wouldn't have been nasty. I was just really curious how he could never see her. So I walked over to him, and we said hello, and he turned to, he was married 7 times. He turned to his 7th wife and said, can I have my wallet? And she gave him his wallet, and he flipped through and stopped at a picture which I had seen. This is the picture. Can they see this if I hold it up like this? Where's the, oh, so this is the picture. This is Becky's high school graduation picture. He took it out and he gave it to me. Now, he hadn't seen her in a long time. And he said, see, this is Becky's graduation picture. Wherever I go, Becky is with me. And I went and told her, and she started to cry. The very next day, we were in a hotel room, and I was reading a book about stories. And one of the stories was about Mother Teresa. And what she did, she had, I guess, a program where if people from the West came and spent 2 weeks in one of her places, at the end of the 2 weeks, they got a one-on-one meeting with Mother Teresa. And the story goes, this one businessman from the US did that. They usher him into Mother Teresa's room, and he sits there because she's late. And when she walks in, he looks at her and he thinks what she did with her life and what he did with his life. And he just starts to sob. And she lets him for a while. And then she walks over to him, puts her hand on his shoulder and says, "My dear man, don't you know God knows you did the best you could?" I took the book and I flipped it in the air. I jumped out of the bed. I was just lying there reading because we were going to meet friends. And I said to Becky, "That's your father's story. He did the best he could." And all of our fathers and mothers, whatever it was, they did the best they could. So Ellie's going to come up and talk about her dad.
Good talk. You brought it all in. Yes, my dad. Okay. I made the comment to a few people that I didn't know my father. And that sounds like he never lived with me. But he did. He wasn't absent. He was there every day. But I don't know who he is inside. No childhood stories, My mother, it was different. She, would tell me when she was 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 what she did, but no talking. Anyhow, I have a few notes, but I'll probably extemporaneously go through this. His name was Peter Francis Nash. He was a very serious and responsible, dependable, all those wonderful things, person to the family. Always there, supported us, had 2 jobs, that sort of thing. He was a New York City policeman. Of course, we were very proud of that, in spite of the fact he never talked to us. He, in the 50s and 60s, people respected the police. And that's why, if your father or someone was a police, you really felt proud and special and so on. We lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, of those of you that might be near my age, with 1 bathroom. We were 6 people, 4 adults and 2 children. And I think the rent was about $40 a month. Now, we didn't feel poor. I in fact, felt middle class until somebody said, "You're working class." My grandmother, which is my father's mother, she lived with us, as well as my cousin Joan, my sister Kathy, myself, and then my mother and father. That made 6 of us. But Kathy once told me that she remembers my mother dressing her for school while she was still in her crib. That's how we lived in those days. She was small enough to still stay in her crib. And if anyone needed a place, you brought them in. You didn't, make an excuse, so I have no room. You made the room for them. Anyway, she said she was probably 4 or 5 years old, but anyhow, certain memories we have. We were always very respectful, in those days, you didn't talk back. Well, maybe to our mother, but you never talk back to your father or your grandmother and so on. So what we would hear if we did, my mother would say, "Wait until your father comes home." Everybody hear that? But it didn't make, so that put like a fear, in us. But he never said anything. When he came, he might say, "But you should listen to your mother," something like that. But he never came home and hit us or yelled at us or anything. It's so funny, But we didn't realize that at the time. It was so scary. So it kind of created this fear of our father. And maybe that kind of removed us a little from him too. I don't know, but maybe we had put up a block of that like that. So I never got to know my father. He never really spoke to me or my sister. I don't remember him really saying anything. We even took big trips, but I don't remember if he ever talked, maybe to my mother. Of course, my memory is not terrific either. Anyhow, but he would pay attention to our report cards. And, you know, we had a report cards. He'd know they were in, you know, whether it was once a month or every quarter or whatever. And he'd want to see them. It was like, whoa. Anyway, I was a very, very good student. I had A's, even in Latin. Who gets A in Latin? And all hundreds. And he would look at it and say, you know, it could have been A+. Really? And from that, I was not good enough. If you're gonna, you know, if I can get an A+ and please him, my God, I mustn't be good enough. And of course, I think a lot of times we put, you know, being good in school and getting good marks as a form of wanting love, you know, getting love from that parent because she was so good. And anyhow, he was very busy. I don't make him into a monster. He was a nice person, of course. And he you know, he worked all day as a policeman, transit police, and he'd get home at 4:30. He'd eat at 4:30, and then he'd lay down and rest for an hour. Oh, you're telling me the time? Huh, I got more to do here. And you took a long time today. Anyhow, you know, and then he'd go out to his second job. So we never really saw that much of him. Maybe on Sunday, that might have been it. But I do remember something like we would invite my aunts and family over for Thanksgiving dinner. And I don't even remember my father talking with him, but he probably did. But after dinner, he would get up, go into the bedroom and take a nap. Everybody was still sitting at the table. And my mother was like, you know, but nothing she could do. So it just gives you, I don't know if he didn't care what people thought, but he was who he was. And that was it. I'll skip now down to, I think what's very important is that I learned that my father, his criticism that I should have had an A+ was that he wanted me to reach my full potential. I don't think it really was a criticism like I thought it was. And I did reach my full potential and had many wonderful careers in my lifetime. So I thanked him in a letter and explained all that to him one day and forgave him for being so remote. I say, thank you. I have more. I'll be back another day.
You could do the more next year. So I told Becky I was going to do 2 stories about her dad. And I think I might have done this one before, but it's really cute. So her dad was dying. And Becky and I went out with friends one day for lunch. And we all had some wine. And then we went back home. And we used to be big Laker fans. And the Lakers were in the playoffs. And Becky and I were watching playoff game. And we had a bottle of wine. And I got this incredible intuitive hit that she needed to call her father. And she said, we had a lot of wine today. I'm not calling him. And I said, you have to call him. And I kept nudging her. You've got to go call your father. And we actually had an argument about it. And I told her, you got to honor my intuition. And finally, she said, okay, I'll call him. And she went upstairs. And about 10, 15 minutes later, she came back down and she was crying. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, nothing. He told me he loved me. And we were sitting on opposite. She was sitting on one couch. I was sitting on a chair. And she sat there for a while. And then all of a sudden she broke up laughing, ran over to me, put her arms around me, gave me a big kiss and said, "Thank you for being such a pain in the ass." So Rosemary, you're gonna come up and like 5 minutes.
It's short. That song, Leader of the Band, boy, whew. My father was a musician, so. My dad was born Ernest D'Agostino on November 5th, 1913. And he was born, his father was an Italian immigrant, and his mother was an Italian American. So interesting, the lineage there that of my grandfather. Somewhere along the line, my father changed his name to Ernest Augustine, because we had many versions in our family tree of D'Agostino, D'Augustine, and then Augustine. At age 17, my dad had two professions. He was a successful musician and he was passionate about music, and he was a dry cleaner. My parents met in the early 1930s at a dance. And although my mom was accompanied by another fellow to the dance, she caught the eye of my dad, and it was love at first sight. They married in 1935, and for the next 12 years, they lived in New York City, while my dad played music with some of the great musicians of the times: Tommy Dorsey, Benny Goodman, Jack T. Gordon, drums. My dad was the fill-in drummer in Benny Goodman's band when Gene Krupa went to jail on drug charges in 1943. In 1947, my parents returned to Vineland, New Jersey to continue to raise a family, and he opened a successful dry cleaning business in the town of Millville. I was born in the process, and my dad continued to play music on the weekends until he died in 1984. Coming from immigrant parents, my dad was old school and very strict. Rebellious as I was, I am grateful for his strict upbringing. By the mid-1970s, I lived in Los Angeles and then later in Denver, and I always traveled home for summers at the Jersey Shore and Christmas holidays to be with my dad. He taught me how to fish. This is us fishing. Day that I caught a lot of fish, you know. He taught me how to fish, and I shared his love for the stock market and how to enjoy music. Fast forward to the 1980s, and long distance calling was cheap before 8 a.m. Some of us may remember that. Dad used to call me at 7:45 a.m. East Coast time, and he was my wake-up call several times a week when I lived in Denver. We would talk about the latest stock pick, and he would end the call with a joke that had us both laughing so hard we were crying. In 1984, my dad took ill on a spring afternoon just after Easter, and he died the next day. Although he's been gone now, I think I wrote here 38 years, he's still a major influence in my life. My first book that I wrote and published in 1995 was dedicated to him, saying he taught me the meaning of perseverance and the value of self-discipline. In closing, this is my dad and I when I lived in Los Angeles. That they came to visit. This was 1977. So living in Los Angeles in 1977, every February, my parents would make the trek to Los Angeles to see my brother and me. He wrote this message to his 3 children a month before he died. I have been blessed with 3 fine children, all of whom have done well in life through hard work and determination. For my part, I have always expected to earn their affection and respect. I have always treated them as my cherished companions, and I have tried to give them a glimpse of the value of self-discipline. I think I've succeeded. I'm a lucky father indeed. Love you, Dad. Ernest Augustine. Boy, I miss him. Think of him every day. Anyway, that's my dad. Happy Father's Day.
Oh, I'm so glad she cried. Wait till you hear what I'm going to read. So, you want to come up? Sure. Patrice is going to come up and talk about her dad.
Mm, my daddy, he was the best dad that a strong-willed little girl could have. He was the youngest of 6 boys, and his dad died when he was 12. And he got married and had me later in life. And so all of my cousins were 15 years and older than I am. And in later life, they've all told me I got the best one, that he got more time with his mom, less time with his dad. And he was the best one. And he was. He told my mom when she was pregnant that he wanted girls. He said, I grew up with 6 boys. I'd like girls. So she complied. I have a sister. And then I had 4 girls. And then one of my girls had 4 girls. So he got his girls. And that was the light of his life, was his girls. He taught me everything. My mom says he wasn't around much when I was little because he was a firefighter. He fought forest fires, and we lived on a mountaintop in California and then in Colorado. And he was gone a lot fighting forest fires. I always thought that was the coolest thing. But after my sister was born, which was when I was 9, he was around a lot more. My mom kind of told him, you need to train other people to do that. You're getting old, because he was in his late 30s by that time. And so he was around a lot. And I didn't realize until I became a parent that my Saturdays with my dad was probably my mom saying, okay, I got the baby, you take the big one. But he did. And we would go, and I would sit there, and while he got his haircut every Saturday, he got a haircut. And I would get one of those little Tootsie Rolls. When gas came in, that you pump your own gas, he decided, and again, at the time I didn't realize, I thought this was just a fun way I could make money at 10 years old. He told me later, no, it was to teach you math. Oh, it worked, because I'm really good at math. But he would drive by and find the most expensive gas station for full service and the cheapest gas station for self-service. And so he knew before we left on Saturday. I didn't know that. And we'd go by, and as long as I could do the math of what the difference was, and then I had to do the math on how many gallons I pumped in there. And if I got the math right, I got paid. Well, I got the math right, so I got money. It was awesome. He laughed and laughed when, I told him that was a memory, and he goes, no, that was just to teach you math. He had a laugh. Oh my, he had a laugh. He had a laugh. He always said he loved me. Every morning he would kiss all of us when he left for work and said, I love you. Every night when he got home, he would open his arms for a great big bear hug. My mother wouldn't have dared, said, wait till your father got home, because we would have laughed at that. She was the disciplinarian. I had always called him Daddy. I still do. My sister decided to call him Pops. Don't know why. Just my sister. So when my oldest daughter was born, she put the 2 together, and Poppy was born. And my dad was forever Poppy after that. Everybody called him Poppy. Everybody called him Poppy. But before that, when I was young, one of my memories is he was the dad that all the kids wanted. And yet, and people you have said to me as an adult, well, didn't that make you feel bad? It's like, no, because I knew I lived with him. I could share, because all of the other kids in the neighborhood, they loved coming to my house. At his memorial, they remembered him making green eggs and ham in the morning, because he did have a sense of humor, and his pancakes. He was the dad that was out there, because we lived in Colorado on a hill like this, and we were close to the top of it. And he was the one that was out there with all the kids sledding. He'd pull the sled back up, and all we had to do was walk, and he would get on the sled, and then we'd ride on top of him to make sure it went fast. Oh my goodness. He was so. So when I saw the movie The Shack a few years ago, and remember how she talks about her name of endearment for God. Poppy is what came to me. So that is my name for father, for a beloved who loves you so much you can't imagine anything else. God is Poppy, because that's my dad.
Wow. Wow. So I wrote this. I don't remember when I wrote it, but I think I wrote it for a writing class that I was in. And I titled it, strangely enough, My Dad. I have just graduated from NYU Graduate School of Business Administration. I'm 24 years old, I have an MBA, and it feels like the world is opening up for me. I have a sought-after degree, a new job which puts money into my pockets for the first time, and I am ready to fly. One night, my fraternity brother, Jimmy Fuller, calls me up and invites me to a party at his new apartment in Queens. The traffic is horrendous. It takes forever to get to Jimmy's place, but I finally arrive. The building is newer than the one I live in with my parents, but it's nothing out of the ordinary for New York City, a large nondescript high-rise, which looks like it could use a good washing. I go into the lobby and press the elevator for Jimmy's floor. The elevator reeks from stale bear and sweat. I'm beginning to have second thoughts about this place. Jimmy is a joker, and maybe he's setting me up for something. I get off the elevator and I can hear people laughing, lots of people. The door is open and I go in. I have just stepped into heaven. The place is filled with great-looking young women, all with drinks in their hands and looking very available. Jimmy sees me and comes over to say hi. He explains that the building, like its sister building next door, is filled with all young stewardesses. He and his roommate, Ray, are the only guys in this building, and the only male in the next building is married. By the end of the night, Rudy, a guy I just met, but who was a childhood friend of my best friend, and I have agreed to be roommates. And this is where my story really begins. The next morning, I can't wait to tell my parents. When I do, my mother explodes, reminding me how they sacrificed for me, and now that I'm finally making money, I'm going to leave. She rants on and on for what seems like forever. My dad is quiet. Later, he and I talk alone. I explain about the building and the girls, and he got it. He tells me he'll miss our times together, but I remind him I'll only be 45 minutes away. The day I'm moving, my mother's rants continue. I've learned how to tune her out years ago, so what she's saying means nothing. But I can see my dad is hurting. He helps me down with my things, and after the car is loaded, we stand in silence. Then he tells me how much he loves me and will always be there for me. He has tears running down his cheeks, which makes me cry too. We embrace, and I get in my car and drive away. Many years later, I'll face a similar crossroad with my youngest son. I'm in great pain, so I do what I always do when in doubt, I meditate. Soon I have a revelation. The universe is giving me a chance to relive a painful episode of my life, but in a different role. How will I react? Like my mother who made it so difficult, or like my dad who rose above his own needs to give me the space I needed? The choice becomes easy. I will do what my dad did. I do, and the situation ends wonderfully. This is just one example of how the man I was privileged to call dad showed me love and caring. My father never went to college. It was one of his biggest regrets of his life. His family was poor, but he couldn't afford to attend. There were no student loans in those days. But from the time I was old enough to understand, he would encourage me to do the best I could so I could have a better life than he and my mother. We would sit together on Saturday mornings and listen to Martin Block and the Make Believe Ballroom, a top 40 show. You got to remember that, right? My dad would tell me how smart I was and I could be anything I wanted as long as I was willing to do the work. In high school, when I brought home less than a stellar report, my mother would yell. My dad would sit me down and remind me how if I wanted a better life, I needed to work harder and stop screwing around. His lessons got through. When I went to college, I received an academic scholarship. What was most important to me about those days was how my father instilled confidence in me. Because he believed in me, I began to believe in myself. I still believe so much of what he taught me, not just by talking, but by how he lived. My father's word was always good. He told me how my reputation was the most important thing I had, so I had to be a good friend and always keep my promises. Twice he came to me and said that he had made me a promise, but circumstances had changed. Both times he told me what was going on, and he said that if I wanted him to keep the promise, he would honor it. The choice was mine. Each time I told him to do what he needed to do, and I remember feeling so special that my dad was willing to let me make the choice. Today, years later, I take great pride that I never break a promise. My father had a great sense of humor. He was so fun to be around. I remember one day I stopped off at his office after school just to say hi. During the course of our conversation, and my father was a federal agent, okay? During the course of our conversation, I mentioned that I needed some pencils for school. He got a look on his face that I knew meant trouble. Sure enough, as soon as the fellow across from him left his desk for a moment, my father took all of his pencils and pens and put them in my briefcase. When the fellow came back and saw what had happened, he said to my dad, who he never suspected, "I can't believe it. Someone stole all my pencils and pens." He kept repeating it over and over. "I can't believe it. I can't believe it." And my father was agreeing with him the entire time while I was choking back laughs. It probably sounds silly, but that was our private joke. When we finally left the office and got in our car, we laughed like two little kids and kept repeating, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it." One ritual I still remember is about our lunches together. I would call him up at work and ask him what he was doing for lunch. He would usually say nothing, and I would then offer to buy him lunch, knowing full well he would pick up the tab. When he did, I would say, "Thank you, that was a great lunch." He would laugh and respond, "Yeah, food always tastes better when someone else is paying for it." I was and still am a Yankee fan. I can't count how many games my father took me to, but one did not just go to the game. We had to arrive at least an hour early to see batting practice and hope to get a ball, which to this day I never have. After the game, we had to wait outside the locker room for the players to leave in hopes of getting an autograph, which also never happened. Never once did my dad complain about this. Years later, long after he was gone, I took my eldest son to see David Copperfield. It was a long day, and by the end of the show, I was exhausted. As the show closed, David announced that in 5 minutes, I just lost my place. That in 5 minutes, he would be in the lobby to sign autographs for anyone who wanted one. Jeremy turned to me and said, "Daddy, can we get his autograph, please?" My body screamed, "No way." But as he asked, in my mind's eye, I saw my dad and me waiting to see Mickey Mantle, and what came out of my mouth was, "Of course, Jeremy." I closed my eyes and silently said, "This is for you, Dad." I've always felt blessed to have a father I had such a great relationship. Even though he has been gone for more years than he was with me, I still miss him. I remember the day my mother called to say he had another heart attack and I better get there quickly. When we arrived, he was in a coma. The next day, when my wife and I went into the cardiac care unit to see him, he was not in his bed, and it was made. That was a tough way to find out your father died. For years, I felt a deep sense of guilt and regret that I never had a last chance to say thank you for all you did for me. I love you. I've since come to peace with it, and I know he knew. At the funeral parlor, one of his friends, a man named Al, asked me if he could speak to me alone. He took me to a corner and said, I want to tell you something that you should remember for the rest of your life. He looked at me, and with tears in his eyes, he whispered, in all my life, I never met a man who loved his son as much as your father loved you. Don't ever forget that. I never have. What?